Tov. So today, we're going to continue the subject of yesterday, which is discussing the idea of when one wakes up or studies at night, he conquers the world of Gvura, of strength, and of judgment, and he brings kindness into his world and kindness into the darkness of night. So, Amar Rabbi Chizkiah, כל man דשתדל בהישעתה באורייתא ודאי לחולקה תדיר בעלמא דעתי. כל מי שמשתדל בתורה אחר חצות לילה, בוודאי יש לו חלק תמיד בעולם הבא. רצו לומר, אפילו בעודו בעולם הזה. Rabbi Chizkiah got up and he said, when a person studies at night, and specifically after midnight, meaning he's studying at the darkness of night, and he helps the sweetening of the judgment, it is guaranteed that he has a place in Olam Haba, a place in the world to come. But the Chidush, the incredible new thing that Rabbi Chizkiah was teaching here, it's not that he has a chelek l'Olam Haba, he has a peace in the world to come when he passes away. But rather, even while he's still alive, he already has a place in Gan Eden. Because while the person is studying, his Torah goes to Gan Eden, his Torah reunites with the Torah of all the tzaddikim, HaKadosh Baruch Hu listens to his Torah. So in other words, he is present within Gan Eden. He's not detached from that world, he's there. So while even the person is in this world, he's able to still have a place in the world to come. כן מה שאמרו חז"ל בברכות, עולמך תראה בחייך. And that's what it says in the Gemara in Brachot, page Yuzayin, Amud Aleph, that a person in this world, while he's still here, can already inherit and could already buy his seat in the world to come. So the idea is not just that your entire life you're preparing your seat, and only after 120 years you sit in it. The chidush is that with some acts you can already have your place above. And you can think about it, that's what tzaddikim. That's what allows them to have so much power of blessing and of miracles. It's not because there's some sprinkly magic on them, but rather because even while they're in this world, their presence in the world to come is so great that it's as if they're there. And when they ask something, they're so close to Hashem because they're already in the world to come. Their presence is already so prominent that whatever they ask, it's easy for it to come true. It's easy for their words to have strength and to have impact and to have kingdomship and to have say in the world above. They're already there. Amar Rabbi Yossi. Sha'al Rabbi Chizkiah. Rabbi Yossi got up and asked something to Rabbi Chizkiah. מהי תמה דתדיר? על איזה אופן יובן שיש לו חלק בעולם הבא בהיותו בעולם הזה? אמר לאחי בור לפינא דכל פלוגתא לילך קדקושא בריחו איתר בגינתא דעדן. אמר לו רבי חזקיה, כך למדתי שבכל חצות הלילה כשהקדוש ברוך הוא מעורר להיכנס בגן עדן, כל הינון נתיבין דגינתא השתקעין יתיב. כל אותם הנתיבות של גן עדן, דהיינו השש קצוות של המלכות, מקבלים השרת יתרה, רצה לומר יותר ממה שמקבלים מאבב קצוות דזעיר אנפין מקבלים. So, Rabbi Yossi asks and says, where did you learn this from? Where did you learn that a person can have a place in Gan Eden even when he's still alive? Where did you get this from? What was your root? So Rabbi Chizkiah looked at him and he answered. He said, I studied from Rabbi Shimon only a few words ago that at the time of Chatzot Laila, Hashem goes into the Gan. Hashem goes into the Gan Eden, into the garden. And when he enters into the garden, he gathers with him all the tzaddikim. And in simpler words, there's a big reunification between Hashem, between the neshamot of the tzaddikim, between the Shekhinah, between the Torah. Everything comes together. Or in more exact wording and more exact concept, we remember that we spoke about this idea of the Shekhinah having 6 corners. So it says that at the time of Chatzot Laila, when there is study, the reunification that happens is not like the reunification that happens on a daily basis. In what sense? We taught and we learned in many different places that in order for the world to function, Hashem reunifies different faces, like Ze'er Anpin Nukva, Abba and Ima, Chochma and Dinah, And when they come together, there is like life that transfers from one hand to the next and allows it to trickle down. When this occurs, when there is this unification, it doesn't occur in such a trickling down process. It's direct. In what manner? So, like what Zohar says, כל העתדות שהם שש קצוות של המלכות מקבלים השעת היתרה עצמם יותר ממה שמקבלים מבעד קצוות זעיר אנפין. So like what we mentioned, usually you have Abba reunifies with Ima, or in other words, Chokhmah and Bina. Bina, like the mother, gives her Shefa and her life to Zeir Anpin, and Zeir Anpin gives the life and the Shefa to the Malchut, to the Nukva. And that's how it's like life. So it's trickling from one to the next. And our world, the Shekhinah, our form of spirituality that surrounds us is what? It's the Shekhinah, it's the Malchut, it's the last face. So the Zohar says, when HaKadosh Baruch Hu comes down to the Eden and he studied with the Tzaddikim, the unification that occurs is not like Chokhmah, Bina, Tiferet, Malchut, Zeir Anpin, Nukva. It happens like in a more direct manner, where the Malchut, the Shekhinah, our Neshamot and our spirituality in us, our physical world, it receives a presence of HaKadosh Baruch Hu that is even higher than Zeir Anpin, meaning there's no trickling, it's direct. From the deepest form of Hashem, straight to Malchut. Maybe you understand? Maybe we can give a little understanding of this. So, usually you have B'yichud, Chokhmah, Bina, Bina, Zeir Anpin, Zeir Anpin, Malchut. נכון? Chokhmah, Bina, Zeir Anpin, Nukva, Malchut. נכון? When this unification happens and Hashem descends to the garden, he doesn't necessarily take any specific form. Rather, it's a direct presence from HaKadosh Baruch Hu into the Malchut, into the Shekhinah, in a manner that is very unique. וכל התמנטיבות של הגן, דהיינו שש קצוות של המלכות מקבלים השארת יתרה. רוצה לומר יותר מה שמקבלים מפף קצוות זעיר אנפין. מקבלים מהו נחלה, מאותו הנחל דאיקה נחל קדומין. מצד החוכמה, מצד הבינה, מצד אבא ואמא עילאין, שייחודם תדירין. So like what we mentioned, Malchut doesn't get just the presence of Zeir Anpin, but rather it gets its Shefa straight from the Chokhmah. So from the highest phase. So rather, from the Chokhmah giving it to the Bina, and the Bina giving it to the Zeir Anpin giving it to the Malchut receives its life from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, from all the presence of Hashem. From the Chokhmah, even from the Bina, something very, very unique. And we can give like an analogy. The analogy can be given like you have father, mother, son, daughter-in-law. Okay? Father, mother, son, daughter-in-law. When the son gives a gift to his wife, to the daughter-in-law, he gives something, what he could afford, depending on what his work allowed him to do. But when the parents of the Khatan, when the parents of the husband decide they want to give the bride a gift, they work for many years, they're much more established, they're much more permanent, their situation is consistent, they're not in a place of fluctuation like the young boy. So when they give a gift, it's a big gift, something that is very, very valuable, very, very prestigious. So it's kind of the same thing. Not at all, but it's for our ears to grasp. So, ומאותו הנחל, דיקרא מצד החוכמה, נחל העתידים, מצד הבינה, ורצה לומר, מצד אבא ואמא עילאין, שייחודם תדירין. דלה פסקן מיומא דלילה, ולכן אין ממה שפעם נפסקים לעולמים. כביכול זה האדם הקם בחצות לילה ועוסק בתורה. נחשבו לו כאילו הוא נחלה, התירה על רישם ומשקלה בגוד אינו נתירין ודגבנה. כאילו אותו השפע הנחל נמשך על ראשו, ומשקה אותו בתוך אותו הנתיבות שבגן עדן שמקבלים משקיעים משפע של חוכמה ובינה בחצות לילה. רצה לומר, הוא הראשון בעולם הזה המקבל את השפע העליון, וממנו נשפעים כל התחתונים. And Rabbi Chizkiah says that person that studied Torah at midnight or at night, instead of sleeping, instead of doing shtiyot, he was studying the Torah. He essentially took part in the cause of that big shefa that the Malchut received. So like we mentioned, Malchut is a very, very broad idea, being that the Malchut is a term that we use for our world. It's a term that we use for the Nishamot, the world of the Nishamot. It's a term that we use for the Shekhinah. It's a term that we use for the Nukva. So Malchut is something that is very, very broad. Our Nishamot get life from the Shekhinah. So the Shekhinah is like the mother of the Nishamot. The Zohar Kadosh says, when a person causes the Malchut, which is the Shekhinah, to be so gifted with so much life and abundance, by your study of Torah, you are essentially the cause of that life that the Malchut has now. But that Malchut has life for one purpose, to give you life. So the life that you get in return is something that is much higher than what anyone else would get. But it goes even further than that. It says even more. It says you tap into that everlasting abundance that Abba and Ima have to offer. We mentioned that the father-in-law and the mother-in-law, the parents, they're established. They don't fluctuate. So that's Abba and Ima. Abba and Ima, there's a reunion that never stops. And we spoke about that when we did the first page of the Akdama Zohar Kadosh. The difference between Malchut is Mem, right? Mem has two versions of the letter. There's one version of the letter where it is open. There's a break, meaning it's not an everlasting cycle. There's a break in the middle. That's a regular Mem. And then the Mem Sofit is a closed off square. It's a closed off square. Mem Sofit, which is a closed off square, represents everlasting Shefa. So the Malchut, in its essence, in its reunion with Zeir Anpin, which is the two faces of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, has a form where it attaches, and for that moment it's everlasting, but then can cut. While the Binah in the Chokhmah is like a Samech. A Samech is always a loop. So when a person studies Torah, he taps into that everlasting, established wealth of life. And he receives that everlasting abundance of wealth of life. Not from the Malchut, which would usually be our source of life, but rather we skip a few steps. And we go to a higher level of Hashem, a deeper form of Hashem. And just to be clear, these different faces that we've speaking about are the different faces of Hashem Himself. He created in order to dilute His light, to be able to be absorbable by creations and not burn us like the heat of the sun. טוב. ולא עוד, אלו, הואיל וכל הצדיקים שבגן מקבלים שפע, הוא שומעים את כל תורתו, חולקה שווין לי בהאו שכבין דנחלה, לכן נותנים לו חלק באותו השפע של נחל הנמשך בחוכמה והבינה. השתכח, דאירו לחולקה עתיד בעלמא דעתי, נמצא שאפילו בעודו בעולם הזה, יש לו חלק בעולם הבא. היינו משפע חוכמה ובינה שהם סוד עולם הבא. And the Zohar Kadosh says, being that all the tzaddikim are present there, and they hear this man's voice, meaning when you study Torah at night, we said that all the nishamot go, shh, let's listen. So because they're listening to your Torah, you're giving them merit, when they get their abundance from Chokhmah and from Binah, from the higher forms of Shefa, Abba and Ima, they say, Rega, we have to give him some. His voice was heard too. So they take part of the Shefa, and they make a little spot, and they say, okay, let's put some abundance here. Let's put some life here. And they end up, the Nishamot of the Tzaddikim prepare the spot for that individual. Or in simpler words, Chelek ba'olam haba, a place in the world to come. A place in the higher world. Presence in the higher world. Merit in the higher world. Not just any merit. Extremely sweet mirrors, from a higher level, from a higher world, from a higher face of Hashem. Rabbi Abba ואתי מטבריה לתאונה דחמויה. רבי אבא היה בא מטבריה לבית של חמיו. מקום אסיפת גדולים ושרים תרגום סראין תורניה. So, Rabbi Abba was traveling from Tiberia, and he stopped by this place that it was like a stop that everybody rested in. ורבי יעקב ברי. And Rabbi Abba was there. הווה אימה ורבי אבא בנו היה עמו. יראו בכפר תרשם. פגשו באמצע דרשם בכפר תרשם. ונכנסו ללון באכסניה אחת. כד בל משכב ואמר רבי אבא למה ירד דביתה. שרצו ללכת לישון. אמר רבי אבא לבעל הבית, היכא תרנגולה, האם יש לכם תרנגול? אמר להם, מהירא דביתא עמא. שאלו בעל הבית, למה נצרך לו תרנגול? אמר לי, בגין דקמיה בפלוגתא דלילה ממש. אמר רבי, אבא לפי שאני נוהג. אוקיי, אמר לי, לא יצטרך, אלא בעל הבית ינעיר, יצטרך תרנגול להעיר אותך. דהאו סימנה לי בביתה, כי יש לי סימן בביתי, דאדן תקלה דקרא ירסה לי בביתה. So Rabbi Abba and Rabbi Yaakov, when they met, they said, let's go to a hotel. They stopped at this hotel. And when they stopped at this hotel, they said, okay, let's find a hotel that will allow us to study at night. Or in other words, to do what this whole teaching was. They didn't want to miss out on the study of night. So they came to the owner of the hotel. And they asked the owner of the hotel, do you have a rooster? Why? Because there was this idea that a lot of the Mekubalim would use roosters to wake them up at Chatzot Laila. So it's not really clear of what they did to the rooster to make it wake them up at night, but it was like, it's a concept that's very, very common in the Zohar Kadosh, that this idea that at midnight the rooster screams and it wakes up, it would wake up the Tanaim. And that's how they would know that it's midnight and it's time to start studying. So the owner of the hotel said, don't worry, you don't need a rooster. I have a device in my home, some siman, that allows to wake me up at night when it's midnight. So somehow we had some sort of gadget that he created, maybe the first alarm clock, that allowed him to be awake at night and to be able to identify when it was midnight. So he said, don't worry, I will put this gadget in your room and it will wake you up. דדנין תקלה דקרא ארסה מלילה למאי ונטיף טיף כי משקל זה שלפני מטאטי אני ממלא מים ותפעלה בלילה והוא נוטף טיפות דרך נקב רק שבוע ובחצות לילה ממש מתקים כל הלילה את הכלי ומתגלגל ויורד את הכלי הדבוק ומשקל ועושה עושו רעש. What is this gadget? It was like some sort of bucket with water that would drip, and by Chatzot Laila, by midnight, the water would finish, and then the bowl would get too heavy, and when it would get heavy, it would fall and make a big noise, and that's what would wake them up at midnight. Very clever. וכדין הוא פלוגתא גדילה ממש, ואז הוא מוזמן לחצות לילה ממש, וחד סבא והווה לי דעתה קם וכל פלוגתא גדילה, והשתתת באורייתא ובגין כך עבדי הווה, וזקן אחד היה לו, שהיה קם וכל חצות לילה ועוסק בתורה, ולכן עשה את תחבולת זה. אמר רבי אבא ברי, אמר רבי אבא ברך, השם ששלחני לכאן. בפלוגתא נהירו גלגל הדתא בחצות לילה, נהרו הגלגול, המשקל ועשה בית ביתו, והכינו את עצמו לעסוק בתורה. So, Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Abbas said, why did you create this gadget? He said, because there was an old man that used to sleep at this hotel, this owner of this Akhsanya, this hotel, and he always wanted to be waking up at night, so I created this gadget for him. So Rabbi Yaakov and Rabbi Abba blessed him. They said, thank you so much for Hashem that sent me to you, that you are so involved with wanting to keep the study of night alive. So they took this device into the room and they did it, and at midnight they woke up. שמעו להוא גברא דאו יעטיף בשיפולי בבית הבתרים באונו אימה. שמעו לאותו הבעל הבית, יושבי בגנים בבית ושני בניו, אמו שרכבה וקדם כולם הם לקום קודם. ואמר כתיב חצות לילה קום להודות לך על משפטי צדק. ושאל קם חמא דוד הוא חצות לילה ולא חצות לילה. מה ראה דוד שאמר חצות לילה ולא בחצות לילה? So first of all it says when the noise made woke up the Tanaim, they found that the Baal Habayit, the owner of this hotel, was sitting with both of his sons waiting for them to start studying Torah. So he knew that they were going to start, and when they started he wanted to be there, he wanted to hear their teaching. So they opened up their teaching and they said, now that it's Chatzot Laila, Akum leodot LaHashem. It's a famous pasuk. Chatzot Laila, Akum leodot. At midnight we have to wake up to think and to praise Hashem. Praise Hashem on what? On Mishpatei Tzedek, on being fair in the world, on being just in the world. Or maybe we can take this in an understanding that Hashem allowed judgment, but He also allowed the opportunity for us to defend ourselves, to represent ourselves, to give our case to not just have a whole night of darkness and no chance for us to sweeten the judgment, to sweeten the scales. So he asks, why does it say that David HaMelech Alav HaShalom Amar Chatzot Laila velo bechatzot Laila? He said, we wake up Chatzot Laila and not bechatzot Laila. So bechatzot Laila is a more proper language of Hebrew. You say at Chatzot Laila, be. Why it just says midnight? When you want to tell someone wake up, you don't say wake up midnight, you say wake up at midnight. So why didn't it say the be, which would include more proper language? כי אם רצה לומר שהוא קם בחצות, היה לו לומר בחצות לילה. אלא חצות לילה, ודאי קודשא ברוך הוא המלאכי. אלא ודאי מה שאמר חצות לילה, הקדוש ברוך הוא המלכות הנקראת חצות. ואמר כן, ושאל, וכי קודשא בריך הוא, הכי יקרא, האם המלכות נקראת חצות? ואמר, ודאי נקראת חצות. דאו חצות לילה, ממש קודשא בריך הוא, השתכח וסירה בדילה. כי בחצות לילה, ממש המלכות וכל פעם על ישלה נמצאים ומוכנים לשמוע כל התורה. על שם בני ישראל, וכן היא בשעה למשל הצדיקים, ולכן נקרא המלכות חצות לילה. על שם פעולת באותה שעה, כן אמר המלכות הנקראת חצות לילה, שיקום להודות להשם. בשעה זו משפטי צדקתך. אחר ששמעו דברים הללו, בעל הבית אמר לרבי אבא, ודאי נשתתף בשכינתה ונתעטף בשכינה, לעסוק בתורה ונחלנו יחד עם הבעל הבית ולומר, בילה דפומח דשפיך בהקמה, מה נעלה אחרי? דבי פיך שאמרו יפה, מי ששמעת כל זה אמר להון מלאה, דא ולפינה מסווה, אמר לעשות זה למדתי מזקני. So, Zohar says, why did it say Chatzot Laila? Because it wasn't talking about the time. It was talking about an act. Meaning what? It says that David would wake up Chatzot Laila. Not that he would wake up at Chatzot Laila. That he would wake up Chatzot Laila. Because Chatzot Laila is an act. What's the act? It's the act of the Malchut coming together with all the Neshamot, with all the Tzadikim, and it's starting to fight back and to create a resistance against the darkness of night. So it's not that he woke up at Chatzot Laila, meaning specifically the time, but rather he woke up Chatzot Laila. Chatzot Laila is the act of the Shekhinah coming together, all we mentioned for the past yesterday and today. So it said David HaMelech, he would wake up Chatzot Laila, meaning he would start the act, he would push the act, he would ignite the act of the Malchut gathering its strength and fighting the Gvurot of the night. So the idea that David needed to write at Chatzot Laila would be opposite, because it would be contradicting to what really happened, was that he woke up the Chatzot. Everybody understands. So the Zohar finishes in saying what? It says, what blessed we are, us and the owner of this hotel, that we can all share together the merit of awakening Chatzot Laila, awakening this act of bringing abundance to the world and abundance to our neshama, and creating a place in the world above and creating a resistance to fight the darkness of the night. So we really see that the idea of studying at night it's really the sweetening of judgments of the night. But it also can be very clearly understood that it's also the sweetening of judgments of ourselves. Because the same abundance that sweetens the judgment and creates a resistance for judgment and for hardship and for suffering, for the Shekhinah, gets given to us too. That same Shefa, that same life that the Shekhinah got to fight the strength, we got too. It's this light from a higher place. So the idea is that when a person studies at night, he not only brings sweetness in the judgments and the what around him and brings a pipe of oxygen, but rather he does it for the entire, for himself and for all his surroundings. So HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us merit, HaKadosh Baruch Hu will give us the strength to sweeten all the judgments, to come to a place of being connected to the highest places of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Amen.